Welcome to Divorcelaw with attorney David Badanes.
Welcome to Dividing the Pie, How New York Handles Asset Division in Divorce. I'm your host, Abigail Vaca, and today I'm joined by David Badanes. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Let's jump right in. So, how does New York approach the division of assets in a divorce? Is it based on community property or equitable distribution?
In New York State, we are an equitable distribution, which is a fancy way of saying fair. So it doesn't mean it has to be 50-50. It does have to be fair according to what a judge says. And I use a couple examples in this way. And if just simple, just to give people the idea, because it can be very complicated. But let's say each person has their own car. And maybe my car is worth $1,000 more than yours. But I've been driving my car for years and you've been driving your car for years. Many judges are going to say, close enough, good enough. Yes, that car is worth $1,000 more. But it's silly to kind of try to, equalize them, so to speak. I mean, they may, if my car is worth $10,000 more, that's, maybe that we'd be talking a different situation. It's fairness based on many different factors. So it's equitable, which is, again, a word for fair. So when we look at all the assets and the debts, it does not actually have to be 50-50. And there can be many factors on why it may not be 50-50 down the line, unlike, I think, a community property state.
Can you explain the difference between marital property and separate property in New York and how this distinction affects the division?
The general rule is if you bought something after marriage, let's say a house, and even if I put the deed in my name only, but we bought it after marriage, it's assumed to be marital property because we bought it after marriage. So even if I used all my money, the other person wasn't working, whatever, the assumption is it's marital property. So if the other person wants to show that it's separate property, meaning that, or if I want to show it's separate property, let's say I bought the property, I'd have to say, wait a minute, I either inherited it, I got it from a personal injury claim, or, and this is the toughest one, let's say I did actually have a bank account that existed before the marriage. And let's just make believe it had $500,000 in it, hopefully. And no other monies, and that's the key, was put into that account while we are married. And I could show all this by documentation. And I used that $500,000 to buy that house. Well, then it's very clear that all that money came from me because I had it in the bank account before marriage. No other money was put in during marriage, so it's mine. But that's and you need to talk to an attorney. But again, anything bought during the marriage, it's assumed to be marital property, no matter whose name is on the deed or whose name is put on the title or how you bought it, unless, again, it was inherited and you can show that, it was inheritance by documentation or because of a personal injury claim. If I unfortunately got injured and I got some personal injury money and I put in my own bank account, meaning my own name, and then bought the house, but it's all about documentation. So that's the difference. And again, if it's separate property, let me just say the other thing. So if I bought this house before the marriage and my name's on it, then it is separate property. There's some other nuances, but let's keep this simple. So therefore, I would be entitled to the full value of that house, let's say.
Got it. So it sounds like there are a lot of moving parts here.
There are many, many moving parts. This is why you do need an attorney, especially when there's large assets.
In terms of assets, how are retirement accounts, pensions, and those long-term assets divided in a divorce in New York?
And that's even maybe more complicated, I hate to say. So if you have what would be called a traditional pension that most government employees still have, teachers, police officers, if we work for a government agency in whatever capacity, a nurse for a state college, let's say, they're still working for the state. So they get a traditional pension, meaning that, when they retire at 62 or 65, whatever it says, they'll get some money. Now, while you're married, half of what you earn during the marriage in this retirement pension is the other party is entitled to that. 50%. It's black and white. There's no question about it. You can't say there's nothing about marital property or separate property there. It's what we call black and white law. The only exception, I would say, or I wouldn't call an exception, is let's say I worked 5 years or 10 years as a teacher before I got married. Now I get married. So that time before I got married, that part is all mine. And I know I can't do it here, but I usually try to draw people a picture sort of two train tracks, okay, where one train track is this is what you earn before marriage, and the other one is the train track after you're married. That's 50%. So that's very easy in a sense because the pension people, they keep very, very good documentation on how much you earn, when you were started working here, when you got married, etc. You don't have to keep that documentation. That's kept for you. But when it comes to what most people have these days are non-government workers, they typically don't have well, unless you're in a union. Unions typically still have pensions. But if you have otherwise you have probably a 401k or an IRA, which are, of course, retirement assets. There, the problem is it's the same thing. Whatever you earned before, if you had a 401k before marriage, well, that's all yours. Whatever you put in that 401k in the marriage, during the marriage, I should say, 50%. The problem is you probably didn't keep that documentation. So we don't know if you had $5,000 or $10,000 in that 401k at the time of your marriage, right? So without that documentation, no one wants to guess. And the default is, well, we don't know what you got, so everything's going to be marital. So you may lose out on whatever you had in that account, not lose out, but it's going to be considered marital money, even though really it was money that you had before marriage. Does that make sense?
It sure does. And that leads me to my next question. What role do prenup agreements play in the division of assets and debts during a divorce in New York?
So the beauty of a prenup is this, and normally I talk about pensions first, but since we just left off with 401ks and IRAs. So now with a prenup, if it's a good prenup, which is something I would draft, it would say, gee, this asset, this 401k had, I'm making up the numbers, of course, $10,000, $15,000, whatever it is, and that's excluded. Or you may say we're going to exclude the whole thing. Doesn't matter what we put into during the marriage. But either way, it's going to be very, very clear in the prenuptial agreement that asset, how it's going to be divided, if at all, and what's going to be divided. Typically, to make things easier, you would just say the whole thing is mine. Well, it doesn't matter how much I put in the 401k or the IRA during the marriage. And mine will be mine and yours will be yours, so to speak, in the prenup. And the same thing with pension. This is one of the reasons, and if you see my prenup podcast, I say that you don't have to be rich to have a prenup because let's say you're a teacher or a police officer or somebody that's a government worker. One thing they all want to keep their whole pension. But because normally you'd have to split it, what you can do in a prenuptial is say, wait, my pension is going to be 100% mine, and for a government worker. So that is something that's very attractive to many government workers because they know that their pension that they worked hard for will be theirs 100% versus being split in a divorce.
Got it. So let's talk about the thing no one wants to mention, debts. How are debts like credit card balances, mortgages, and loans handled in a New York divorce? And are both spouses equally responsible for those debts?
The general answer is let's talk about debts, credit card debts, because that's what people usually ask me about. The answer is normally, even if it's quote unquote my credit card, it's still considered a marital debt. Of course, there's some exceptions to that rule. Biggest exception is if I use that credit card for either, let's say, gambling or something of that nature, or for an affair, sexual affair, something like that. So that would be the two main exceptions. But otherwise, you use this credit card for things during the marriage, and the judges don't want to go through all your credit card statements to see, well, what was there? What did you use this money for? So the general rule is it's still 50-50, even if it's, it's that other person's debt, even though it's my credit card, again, with some relatively limited exceptions. In terms of a mortgage that you said, that's a lot easier because you have a land or piece of property, and that mortgage, it again, if it's marital property, it's a marital debt. So if your house is worth, again, simple numbers, it's worth $1 million and you have a mortgage of $200,000 and you sold the house, well, you only get $800,000 using my example. So that $200,000 really goes against both people. Loans, unless it's a student loan, and that's another exception. Typically, student loans, it would be, if it's my student loan, then that's something I'd have to take care of by myself. But any other type of loan, let's say a car loan, even a personal loan, if it was taken out during marriage, it's still considered 50-50, typically. And again, a lot of exceptions, but we're trying to keep this generalized.
And what's the process for valuing assets like real estate businesses or investments when dividing them during a divorce in New York?
So evaluation in business, typically you need to retain or hire an expert in that field. I'm an attorney. I don't value businesses. That's not my degree. So most attorneys would hire another expert to say, hey, we have this business, ABC, whatever. They say it's worth $1. I think it's worth 1 million. We don't know. They would then go and do their accounting and their expertise to give you a number, and they would do that, and they give that in a writing. So now everybody can say, well, this particular business is worth whatever. Real estate, of course, is much easier. Again, I don't appraise real estate. We get there's many real estate appraisers out there, not too expensive. And again, they will look at the market and give you a written report on what they appraise the property at. That happens almost every divorce if there's property. Investments also somewhat similar depending what type of investment is, but typically, again, the attorneys would retain a third-party expert to give us a report on what these investments are worth.
And what can individuals do to protect their financial interests and ensure that fair division of assets and debts in a New York divorce?
Well, the first thing is they want to make sure that they inform their attorney of what assets they have and all their and give the documentation to their attorneys. If the attorney doesn't know something exists, there's nothing they can do to protect it. So that's the first thing, is that the client has to make sure, and there's a document that they would fill out to inform the attorney, here's all my assets. I may not know exactly what it's worth, but I can tell you, I know I have this asset, whether it's a piece of land, whether it's a retirement asset, whether it's a 401k, whether it's a bank account, whether it's cryptocurrency now, whatever it may be. And also the same goes on the debt side of the, credit card debt. I have this loan, etc. And a lot of that could be just making sure, handing over the bank account information and documentation and bills you get, and the other things you get in the mail or now electronically, maybe online or whatever, to show the attorney. So that's the best way. And the first thing that should happen is that, so the attorney knows what's the playing field, so to speak.
Got it. That all makes sense. Thank you so much for breaking down such a difficult topic for us. I'm always happy to chat with you.
Always the same here. You have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us for Dividing the Pie, How New York Handles Asset Division in Divorce. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review on our channel.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.